Steve, this was extraordinary on a number of levels, I think.
Head of the Fed, Jerome Powell, just caused a melt-up in the market, sent a bold message to Bitcoin holders, and after announcing the Fed keeps the rates the same between 5.25 and 5.5%, Jerome Powell said this.
The other question, the question of when will it become appropriate to begin dialing back the amount of policy restraint in place, that begins to come into view. And is clearly a topic of discussion out in the world, and also a discussion for us at our meeting today.
And just using that language from Jerome Powell, being open, talking about that potential pivot, this is something we have not seen in years.
It was extraordinary on a number of levels, I think. Number one, the Fed chair in his news conference did nothing to walk anything back from the statement. He did nothing to hawk it up, so to speak. And I know he sounded like it would be premature, and he said as much, premature to declare victory. There was no jumpsuit, there was no aircraft carrier, but he doesn't seem like he's that far away either from doing just that.
Yeah, I think this was a pretty big day, Scott. I think that the Fed pivoted today. I think it went from having this bias to hike to being in neutral with a forecast to cut rates. And I think that's a pretty big deal. And he acknowledged in response to my question that, yeah, they sat around the table today and yesterday, and they talked about rate cuts.
Essentially, Jerome Powell gave the green light to pump your bags. Fed looking likely to pivot, markets ripping, ETF news coming, halving in a few months. Can anything stop crypto?
Scott, I thought the chair might have tried to hold back the water on the dam one more meeting. I guess the data yesterday and today, especially the PPI and what it says, he mentioned this specifically. We talked about it on your show at noon today. What the data today says what's going to happen to the PCE numbers next week made it kind of untenable for him to hold back and to maintain a position that was too hawkish. And just real quick, we have been talking about this number that Jeff was talking about, this CPI ex shelter, which has been below 2% for several months now. There's that number right there, and you can see it. It's down below 2. And then, okay, so it's not fair to take shelter out. The reason you take shelter out is because the shelter component they use there is lagged about 3/4, Scott, from some of the other market-based indicators that are out there. And if you fold those in, you really don't have a problem. It may be that the Fed is already there. And the concern was that the Fed would keep rates high and depress the economy for too long based on bad data.
And let's break down this data. By the way, click subscribe to Altcoin Daily for one video per day, keeping you informed. But as of yesterday, headline CPI was 3.1% as expected, and core CPI was 4.0% as expected.
So the CPI was just released and meet expectations. Here's the two main takeaways and largest variation. First, the consumer price index increased by 0.1% month over month and 3.1% year over year, which is in line with economist expectations and is down from the 3.2% last month. This is a good trend, but we are still above the Fed target of 2%. Second, the core CPI, which excludes food and energy, to have a less volatile read on inflation, rose by 0.3% month over month and 4% year over year, which is also in line with analysts' estimates. Finally, the main variations are shelter costs, which increased again by 6.5% year over year, but is down from the 6.7% figure from last month. The energy category is down 5.4%, as gasoline fell 8.9%. The food category is up 2.9%, led by the food away from home at 5.3%. The food at home is up 1.7%. The vehicle insurance is again among the highest increase, as it's up 19.2% year over year. Worker wages increased by 0.2% month over month and 0.8% year over year on an inflation-adjusted basis.
So the Fed is pushing the stock market to all-time highs. Bitcoin and crypto assets will be next. And why, after almost every single federal funds rate hike we've seen from the Fed for the last 50 years, they almost always led to a recession. Is that recession still coming? Or why does Jerome Powell say this time's different?
It may or may not be about the U.S. economy being different. I think that this inflation was not the classic demand overload, pot boiling over kind of inflation that we think about. It was a combination of very strong demand without question, and unusual supply side restrictions, both on the goods side but also on the labor side, because we had a participation shock. So this is just very unusual. And, we had the view, my colleagues and I broadly had the view that we could get a lot of, you had essentially a vertical supply curve, because you ran into the limits of capacity at very low levels because there weren't workers and because people couldn't, the supply chains were all broken. So we had the view that you could come straight down that vertical supply curve to the extent demand reduced. And, something like that has happened. It happened so far. The question is, once that part of it runs out, and we think it has a ways to run. We definitely think that the sort of supply chain and shortages side has some ways to run. Does labor force participation have much more to run? It might. Immigration could help, but it may be that at some point you will run out of supply side help, and then it gets down to demand and it gets harder. That's very possible. But to say with certainty that the last mile is going to be different, I'd be reluctant to suggest that we have any certainty around that. We just don't know. I mean, inflation keeps coming down, the labor market keeps getting back into balance, and it's so far so good. Although we kind of assume that it will get harder from here, but so far it hasn't.
So comment down below, do you think that this is end of cycle, top of cycle behavior? Or do you think, yes, we may have a cool off, yes, make your own decisions, nobody can see the future, take responsibility for you? But do you think we may be just getting started?
This is not end of cycle market behavior. This is early cycle expansion reaccelerating.
What if it's just a late year, run as fast as you can, catch up to what you missed? A lot of money has come in and it's just chasing everything to the end of the year as rates have come down.
We've seen a huge turnaround in cyclical stocks. The banks are turning, the regional banks are turning up, small caps are leading. I think if this is 98, we can run another 7% from today.
To when?
To year end. 4,800 is more reasonable. But I think that if it was a head fake, we'd see credit calling baloney and we'd see spreads widen or high yield falling. But what's happened is spreads have rallied, high yields rallied. It's actually a improving liquidity rally while investors took $240 billion out of stocks this year. Now, as we get into next year, we'll have an FOMC decision. I think it's going to show the Fed is no longer fighting an inflation war, but really shifting towards managing the business cycle. Huge change. Interest rates could make a huge move lower. Our technician thinks it could be 3.5%, 3.2%. And that would take mortgage rates down to 5 or under 5%. We know that would help the economy. And I think there's a lot of pent-up demand for CapEx. Stocks could do very well next year.
By the way, breaking news by one of the most popular crypto wallets in existence. A few hours ago, they alerted the masses. We have identified and removed a malicious version of the Ledger Connect kit. A genuine version is being pushed to replace the malicious file now. Do not interact with any dApps for the moment, meaning any Ledger-based dApps. We will keep you informed as the situation evolves. Your Ledger device and Ledger Live were not compromised. So Ledger takes another L, essentially, if nothing else, a PRL, and this is a wallet I've used just because usually the wallet you sort of get onboarded to when you first join, you usually use that, much like an exchange, and Ledger was my first wallet. It's still my wallet, one of my wallets. Update. The malicious version of the file was replaced with a genuine version at around 2:35 p.m. CET. The new genuine version should be propagated soon. We will provide a comprehensive report as soon as it's ready, and the latest update if you use Ledger from about an hour ago. Ledger Connect Kit genuine version 1.1.8 is being propagated now automatically. We recommend waiting 24 hours until using the Ledger Connect Kit again. So that is the news today. My name's Austin. Like always, see you tomorrow.